The hearing will begin. I want to thank all of you for being here today to discuss the worsening plight of religious minorities in Iran. Particular thanks to our witnesses, some of whom have traveled long distances to be here with us. I want to, and he's not here, I don't think, I want to specifically recognize my colleague, Congressman Trent Frank, for his leadership on religious freedom issues, and particularly in the case of Pastor Abedini, whose wife joins us here today. Congressman Franks initiated, and I think he should get all of the credit, a congressional sign-on letter that generated over 80 signatures in support of Pastor Abedini's cause. While I'm eager to hear from the witnesses today, I just want to thank him and let everyone know that because of his efforts, this has taken off in a way, and I hope he can be here. I spoke to him, and he has another hearing, but I want to just thank him. And while I'm eager to hear from everybody today, there is one notable absence, unfortunately, and that is the U.S. Department of State. I was amazed that a hearing which was called to highlight the plight of religious minorities in Iran, not to mention the imprisonment of one of our own very own, an American citizen, was not deemed important enough to the department to cooperate with Congress. Actor Woody Allen once said that 80% of success is showing up. Yet even after requesting only 20 minutes of their time for testimony and questions, the Department of State remained unresponsive and ultimately said no. Unfortunately, this is hardly an exception. There's been a disappointment on human rights. This is the second hearing in less than a year that the Commission has convened to highlight human rights abuses in particular countries. Abuses which have resulted in the imprisonment of an American citizen. In both cases, the administration seemed disinterested at best. More broadly speaking, there seems to be an inherent bias in the State Department sometimes on these issues that dealing with the issue of faith. Last year, in the last Congress, we had a bill passed which would set up a special envoy to advocate for Christians and other religious minorities in the Middle East, the Baha'is, the Ahmadis in Pakistan, the Sufis, and many others. Yet it passed the House 401 to 20, and yet the State Department opposed it. I was in Egypt just 2 weeks ago and met with Coptic Christian leaders. They said they felt that the administration was supporting basically the Muslim Brotherhood. Copts, Baha'is, Ahmadis, Muslims, Sufi Muslims, and Christians, among others, are being systematically persecuted in countries throughout the region, Iraq, Egypt, Iran, and Pakistan, to name a few. It is this very reason that I, along with my colleague, Anna Eshoo, introduced bipartisan legislation to create a special envoy position at the State Department charged with advocating specifically on behalf of religious minorities in the Middle East and South Central Asia. This bill overwhelmingly passed the House, as I said, 401 to 20, more than a year and a half ago. It was stalled in the Senate, and it was actually blocked by the senator from my state, Senator Webb, who did it, I guess, at the instigation of the State Department. It is a bipartisan bill. In fact, there were no Democratic votes against it. So we've reintroduced the bill with an issue this Congress, and will continue to press for passage in both houses. Martin Luther King Jr. famously said, "In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." And I think it's important for the administration and for the Congress and both parties to speak out and advocate publicly as well as privately whenever there is a case like this or these other cases that we're talking about. One of the best things they can do is to speak out. Time and time again, when I would meet with dissidents, they would tell me as soon as the U.S. advocates on their behalf through inquiries, letters, their lives improve. The fact is that Nathan Sharansky actually said that when letters were coming in about him, his life actually got better in the perm. Commandant of the camp, Osen, was concerned, who is this person? We got to be sure that we treat him well. So the more people and the government is speaking out and advocating, even to the point their life in the prison gets better. President Ronald Reagan modeled this approach. He respectfully and boldly raised the individual cases by name with the Soviet Union. But President Reagan did so because of a fundamental belief that he said the U.S. Constitution was a covenant, not just for those gathered in Philadelphia in 1787, but for people the world over, transcending time and place. And today, it is important to remember that covenant could be at risk. I also saw a report that the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom did in their 2012 annual report. I'll just read a few sentences. It says, more than 500 Baha'is have been arbitrarily arrested since 2005. 500. Dozens of Baha'is are awaiting trial, while others were sentenced to prison terms ranging from 90 days to several years. So I think the more the government and members of Congress and individuals in the United States advocate, even though at times it may seem frustrating that no one's listening, it does make a difference in the countries where these prisoners are being held. With regard to that, let me just kind of recognize Congressman Smith maybe for an opening comment.
Chairman, thank you very much. And I want to thank you for convening this extraordinarily important and very timely hearing on a critically important topic, and that is the worsening plight of religious minorities in Iran. Iran is often in the news in relation to nuclear negotiations and international sanctions. In the P5+1, Iranian diplomats often are the hardliners, defiant and sure of themselves. But at home, the severe crackdown on all religious minorities and even diversity of thought within the majority Shia religion belies a very jittery regime. The most recent report put out by the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom notes that the government of Iran continues to engage in systematic, ongoing, and egregious violations of religious freedom, including prolonged detention, torture, and executions based primarily or entirely upon the religion of the accused. During the past year, religious freedom conditions continued to deteriorate, especially for religious minorities, most notably Baha'i, as well as Christians and Sufi Muslims, and physical attacks, harassment, detention, arrest, and imprisonment have intensified. Even the recognized non-Muslim religious minorities protected under, or supposedly protected under, Iran's constitution, Jews, Armenian and Assyrian Christians, and Zoroastrians, faced increasing discrimination, arrest, and imprisonment. Majority Shia and minority Sunni Muslims, including clerics who dissent, were intimidated, harassed, and denied. In a misguided attempt to stabilize and strengthen itself, Iran is devouring itself from the inside. And the people of Iran, the good people of Iran, deserve better. Tragically, many governments suppress religious freedom in the false belief that restrictions are necessary to achieve what is euphemistically called social harmony. We've seen it in many parts of the world, including China and, of course, in Iran. However, as was demonstrated in the recent Pew Forum reports on the rising tide of religious restrictions, suppression of religious freedom is correlated with less social harmony, not more. And, of course, that's predictable. Recent research by the Berkeley Center at Georgetown demonstrates the additional connection between government restrictions on religious freedom and violent religious extremism. How many more religious minorities will have to be imprisoned or killed before Iran realizes that this road leads to a self-imposed ruin of their nation? Even more, denying religious freedom leads to the ruination of individuals and families and communities. Denying religious freedom is a violation of the human dignity recognized and guarded by our system of international law. Iran's recent actions against religious minorities violates its agreement to implement the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Both documents affirm that every individual has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, which includes the freedom to change his or her religion or belief, and freedom either alone or in a community with others and in public or private to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. We saw a glimmer of hope in the resolution of the Yosef Nardakoni case. Many of us worked very hard, especially this commission, in 2011 and 2012 about Yosef's human dignity, his freedom to follow his conscience, and Iran's duty to leave him in peace. Matter of fact, Robert Adderholt and I and Jeff Fortenberry traveled to New York, met with the Iranian ambassador to the United Nations, had a 3-hour meeting. And we talked about how we were people of the book. We cared deeply about faith. And to mistreat this man as they were doing was casting a great deal of dishonor upon the Iranian government. The bizarre arrest last summer of Pastor Saeed Abedini is a huge step backward, especially given Iran's previous agreement, even their request that Pastor Saeed channel his energies towards humanitarian relief efforts in Iran, which he has. The pastor has been arrested in Iran before, but was allowed by the government of Iran to return to his wife and children in the United States if he agreed to stop leading the house churches in Iran. Pastor Saeed returned to Iran in 2012 to visit his parents and siblings and finish the orphanage that he had begun. He was arrested and, as we all know, sentenced to 8 years in prison, joining the Baha'i leaders and so many other prisoners of conscience who suffer great indignity and torture in Iran's prisons. Some would say that these violations of religious freedom are insignificant and a distraction when faced with Iran becoming a nuclear power. However, I would profoundly disagree and argue that helping Iran to understand the dignity of human rights and of the dignity of every person, that each individual is endowed by his or her creator with human rights that must be respected, is fundamental to ensuring a peaceful and stable Middle East. Again, I would ask you, I'm just going to my full statement be made a part of the record. I want to join you and the commission in welcoming the courageous wife of the pastor, but also our first panel. I've known Jay Sekulow forever. He has been a tenacious defender of religious freedom and human rights worldwide, in Africa, in so many places, and of course in Iran. And of course, Dr. Sweat is a great friend of all those who are at risk and whose rights are violated. So you have really assembled a panel of truly remarkable people. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Adderholt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will keep my words to a minimum. I just want to say welcome to everyone that's here this morning. And thank the chairman for conducting this hearing. This issue that we're talking about today, I think, is one that's weighed heavy on the minds and hearts of all Americans. I go back into Alabama, and people are talking about this case, and I know that all over the country they are, and so certainly not only the case that we're about today and referring to Saeed Abedini, but also to all the other situations that we've seen occur, the atrocities that we've seen in Iran. So calling attention to this is certainly appropriate. And certainly it's high time that we conduct this here. And I especially want to thank our panelists for being here today. All of your presence here is very important. And Nagmi Abedini, thank you for being here. We certainly, your thoughts, you are in our thoughts and prayers during this time, and we look forward to your testimony here in a few minutes. But again, we look forward to this testimony, and hopefully what comes out of it will be something positive for everyone, not only in Iran, but also around the world. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Adderholt. Before I'm going to recognize Katrina Lanta Sweat, Chair, U.S. Commission on International Human Religious Freedom, whose father this commission is named after, and Jay Sekulow, Chief Counsel, American Center for Law and Justice. And I want to announce that we're going to keep the record open to give the State Department an opportunity to comment, and we'll keep the record open for another week. And it'll be telling if they don't comment, and it'll be significant if they do comment, both on the case of the pastor and on the case of the Baha'i. So there is an opportunity, and the comment that I made with regard to Martin Luther King's silence of your friends. So if there's silence of our friends by the State Department over the next week, that'll be very, very telling. But if they do speak out boldly, and given that opportunity, that will be very telling. With regard to that, we'll go, why don't you go first?
Thank you so much, Chairman Wolf, and I'm honored to be here. And before I begin my formal remarks, I want to join the three of you in recognizing the beautiful and brave wife of Pastor Abedini, who is here with us today. Many in this room may remember Avital Sharansky. And I feel that Mrs. Abedini is really following in those very brave footsteps. That was another time and another battle for human rights, but we then too had a prisoner of conscience, a deeply religious man who was buried in the Soviet gulag at that time. And his wife went around tirelessly to office after office, congressman after congressman, to the State Department, everywhere where she could be heard. And eventually, she was central in winning freedom for her husband. So I just want to acknowledge your bravery and thank you for what you're doing. I want to thank the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission for inviting me to testify on behalf of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom on the worsening plight of Iran's religious minorities, and I request that my full testimony be placed in the record. For over a decade, USCIRF has recommended and the State Department has designated Iran as a country of particular concern, or CPC, because of its systematic, ongoing, and egregious violations of religious freedom. These violations range from prolonged detention, torture, and executions to daily acts of discrimination, all based on primarily the religion of the accused. Iran stands today as one of the world's worst religious freedom abusers. Members of religious minority communities all have had their rights violated, from the Baha'is and Zoroastrians to Christians and Jews, as well as Muslims belonging to minority Sufi and Sunni sects, and even Muslims who are part of Iran's Shia majority. Indeed, since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, any Iranian who has dissented from the government's own interpretation of Shia Islam may be labeled an enemy of both the state and, quote, true Islam, and thereby become a potential target for abuse by the authorities. In fact, in late February, the UN's Special Rapporteur on the Situation of Human Rights in the Islamic Republic of Iran issued a report that underscores the continued widespread and systematic violations of human rights in Iran and the ongoing intimidation, arrest, and detention of religious minorities. And I would like to request, Mr. Chairman, that this report be submitted for the record. Thank you. Today, I will highlight these abuses of Iran's religious minorities and summarize USCIRF's recommendations on how to respond. Let's start with Iran's non-Shia Muslims, its Muslim minority communities that include Sunni and Sufi Muslims. Sunni Muslims have endured widespread discrimination in government employment, bans on their religious literature, arrests and other abuse of clerics, and the destruction of Sunni mosques in eastern Iran. Iran's government has also been stepping up its arrest of its Sufi Muslim minority, while increasing restrictions on places of worship and destroying Sufi prayer centers and meeting halls. Over the past few years, authorities have detained hundreds of Sufi Muslims, particularly from the Nematoli Gonabadi order, sentencing many to imprisonment, fines, and floggings, and they have attacked or demolished several Gonabadi prayer centers. Iranian state television also has aired hateful programs denigrating and demonizing Sufism, and the government is reportedly considering a ban on Sufism. With regard to Iran's treatment of its non-Muslim religious minority communities, let me begin with its Baha'i community, whom the UN Special Rapporteur identified as the most persecuted religious minority in Iran. Since 1979, authorities have killed more than 200 Baha'i leaders and dismissed more than 10,000 from government and university jobs. But that's not all. Baha'is may not establish places of worship, schools, or any independent religious associations in Iran. Baha'is are barred from the military and denied government jobs and pensions, as well as the right to inherit property. Their marriages and divorces also are not recognized, and they have difficulty obtaining death certificates. Baha'i cemeteries, holy places, and community properties often are seized or desecrated, and many important religious sites are destroyed. A report released last week by the Baha'i International Community notes that more than 660 Baha'is have been arbitrarily arrested since 2005. By the end of 2012, at least 110 Baha'is were being held in prison solely due to their religious beliefs, 10 times the number incarcerated in 2005. Among these are 7 Baha'i leaders who are serving 20-year sentences on dubious charges. Baha'i educators and administrators since 2011 have been serving multi-year terms on equally groundless allegations. In recent months, the Iranian government has managed to stoop to a new low by incarcerating young infants along with their Baha'i mothers. And I must tell you that as the mother of 7 children myself, I find that almost unbelievable.
What ages?
Infants, months to 10 months, 5 months, 10 months, and over a year. And one of those children, I should mention, has acquired a serious lung infection because of the incredibly unsanitary conditions in these abysmal prisons, and so has had to be hospitalized. It's really a human rights violation of shocking proportions. An October 2011 report by the Baha'i International Community summarized the relentless propaganda against the Baha'i as follows. They are accused of being agents, and I'm quoting, they are accused of being agents for various imperialist or colonialist factions. They face continuous but utterly unfounded allegations of immorality. They are branded as social pariahs to be shunned. The propaganda is shocking in its volume and vehemence, its scope and sophistication, cynically calculated to stir up antagonism against a peaceful religious community whose members are striving to contribute to the well-being of their society. And I want to just add that I met just the other day with a number of representatives of the Baha'i community, and truly you would be hard-pressed to find a community on the face of the earth more peace-loving, more gentle in their spirit, and it is an incredible reflection on the character of the Iranian government that they target them in this vicious way. I'd next like to turn to the persecution of Christians. The Iranian government, I am sad to say, is an equal opportunity abuser. Along with its severe mistreatment of Baha'is, Iran's government continues its repression of Christians, particularly evangelicals and other Protestants, who are subject to arrests, surveillance, imprisonment, and even death, and many are reported to have fled the country. In September 2012, the UN Special Rapporteur Ahmed Shahid stated that since 2010, more than 300 Christians have been arrested and detained arbitrarily. In an outrageous miscarriage of justice, Saeed Abedini, an Iranian-born American citizen pastor, was sentenced this January to 8 years in prison. His, quote, crimes include his participation in Iran's house church movement. 5 Iranians who converted to Christianity will go on trial this week in Iran's Revolutionary Court. They were arrested on charges of evangelism and other charges after security forces in the city of Shiraz raided a house church during a prayer session. Members of Iran's Zoroastrian community also have come under increasing repression and discrimination, as has the Sabian Mandian community. In recent years, hundreds of Sabian Mandian families reportedly have fled the country. Along with Zoroastrians and Christians, Jews are considered members of a so-called protected religious minority. However, this protection does not seem to mean very much for any of these groups. Official government discrimination against Jews continues to be pervasive, fostering a threatening atmosphere for the approximately 20 to 25,000 member Jewish community, the largest Jewish community outside Israel in the Middle East and North Africa. Policies promoting anti-Semitism have risen sharply in recent years, and Jews have been targeted on the basis of perceived ties to Israel. Iran's top leaders have made public remarks denying the Holocaust and calling for Israel's elimination, and they have sanctioned anti-Semitic propaganda involving official statements, media outlets, publications, and books. In addition, numerous programs broadcast anti-Semitic messages on state-run TV. A prominent newspaper held a Holocaust denial cartoon contest, and the government sponsored a Holocaust denial conference. Anti-Semitic cartoons depicting demonic and stereotypical images of Jews along with Jewish symbols also have been published in the media. Looking ahead, Mr. Chairman, with Iran's presidential election in June approaching, we are concerned that the government will seek to crush dissent as in the past. We urge members of Congress, and I know here I'm preaching to the choir, but that's not necessarily true with all of your colleagues. We urge members of Congress, the administration, and the international community to keep the spotlight shining on Tehran. We hope President Obama will do so next week in his annual Nowruz message to the Iranian people to commemorate the Persian New Year. If ever Iran's persecuted people need a voice, it is now. Given Iran's abysmal human rights and religious freedom record, how should the United States respond? Let me highlight briefly 4 of USCIRF's recommendations. First, the U.S. government should continue to designate Iran as a country of particular concern, or CPC, and sanction Iran based on its systematic, egregious, and ongoing violations of religious freedom. We believe these violations deserve a sanction of their own and should not be double-hatted with other sanctions. Second, the United States should continue to identify Iranian officials responsible for particularly severe religious freedom abuses, including but not limited to Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, and we should continue to freeze their assets and bar their entry into the United States. Third, Congress should reauthorize the Lautenberg Amendment, a lifeline for religious minorities in Iran, and I know you've been incredibly active on behalf of that issue, and thank you for that, Chairman Wolf. The amendment establishes a presumption of eligibility and allows fast-track processing to prevent undue backlogs in countries that host their processing. Congress also needs to reauthorize the Lautenberg Amendment for multiple years, thereby eliminating the disruptions and uncertainties that result from single-year reauthorizations tied to the appropriations process. And finally, let me end where we should always begin, with people. The United States should call on Iran to release all prisoners who have been jailed on account of their religion or belief and drop all charges against those with cases pending. And this leads me to a pivotal point. It's time to shine the brightest light possible on those who have been unjustly imprisoned, as you are doing in the important Defending Freedoms project. It's time to unveil names and faces, and so, with your permission and my remaining time, I'd like to name and show the pictures of some of those people whom Iran has so unjustly imprisoned. We will keep them in our hearts and minds as we continue to work for their freedom and that of others whom the Iranian government has so unjustly imprisoned. So let me share with you some of Iran's prisoners of conscience. This is Pastor Saeed Abedini, who we have heard so much about. This is Farshid Fatih, another Christian leader who has been imprisoned. This is Benam Irani, yet again another Christian suffering imprisonment for his religious convictions. We would like to draw attention to the Shia Muslim cleric Ayatollah Burajardi, who has spoken out for the separation of mosque and state and for a more humane approach to Shia Islam in Iran. I would like to draw your attention to the Baha'i 7, and I'll read their names one by one. Fariba Kamalabadi, Jamaluddin Kanjani, Afif Naemi, Saeed Rezai, Mavash Sabet, Beruz Tavakoli, and Vahid Tisfam. These 7 brave individuals who were sort of the ad hoc leaders of the Baha'i community, all arrested, all imprisoned in really unbelievable conditions. Mahmoud Badavam, Farhan Hashami, and these are some of the Baha'i educators. You know, it's really extraordinary. The Baha'i community has created over the past quarter century this remarkable sort of virtual and hidden online university to educate their young people. And a couple of days ago, I met a beautiful, gorgeous young Baha'i woman who's now getting her master's in architecture at Berkeley, in one of the finest architecture programs in our country. She had been educated at the BIHI, Baha'i Institute for Higher Education. And every single one of her credits from that university, which is sort of underground, in basements, online, was accepted by Berkeley, one of the top academic institutions in the world. I think that speaks volumes as to what they are doing. And these are some of the educators put their lives on the line to educate their young generation, and now they're in prison for it. Nushnin Kadem, Kamran Mortazi, Shaheen Negari, Kamran Rahimian, Kaivan Rahimian, Farhad Seji, Riaz Sobhani, and the last one, Ramin Zibai. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share their faces and names with you today, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Dr. J. Sekala?
Thank you, Mr.
Your full
Chairman.
statement will appear in the record. You can proceed as you see it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of Congress, for being here. You all have taken a bold step. You continue to, and we appreciate your ongoing work. And on behalf of all of my colleagues at the American Center for Law and Justice and our global affiliates, I want to thank you for allowing me to come before you today about the situation, the rapidly deteriorating situation in Iran, especially as it relates to religious minorities. I also want to thank your staff, who've been very helpful in these proceedings. I want to just briefly mention in the outset here in the case of American Pastor Saeed Abedini, a U.S. citizen imprisoned in Iran and sentenced to 8 years because of his Christian faith. Just so the Commission understands, we've heard from over 500,000 people, actually 512,537 people in just a few weeks that are concerned about his situation. With our ongoing legal representation of the Abedini family, we are keenly aware of the vital importance of this hearing today. But there is a fundamental problem for Saeed Abedini's case. I'm a litigator. That's what I spend most of my time doing. You always look at where's the problem. The problem in his case is that the State Department is AWOL. They are absent without leave. They are missing. They did not show up today. They did not show up at the United Nations. They act as if they are embarrassed about Mr. Abedini's faith. Rather, all 27 EU countries at the United Nations called for the release of Pastor Saeed Abedini. The United States was silent. Australia demanded his release. The United States was silent. And I think the State Department's refusal to appear before this committee today is extremely troubling and frankly offensive. It's offensive, and I look at it first from a legal standpoint. Sure, it's offensive from a legal standpoint. But it's offensive to Naghmeh Abedini, the wife of this pastor. And if his children were old enough to understand the scope of what was going on, it would be offensive to them as well. That their government, the State Department, snubbed this commission. And that cannot be seen as anything less than a wanton disregard to stand up and speak out for someone who cannot speak out for himself right now. And I also believe it reveals a stunning lack of concern for protecting human rights and religious freedom. The failure to appear today and to testify, frankly, is inexcusable. We've had some dialogue with the State Department over the last several months, and I will be honest, Mr. Chairman, it has not been pleasant. The lack of concern, the lack of engagement has been problematic in our work to free Pastor Saeed Abedini. You know, it's interesting that in the Yusuf Nardakani case, which Congressman Smith, you mentioned, and this commission played such a key role in, the State Department was active in helping obtain his release. And we were, of course, very engaged in that case as well. And I'm glad that Pastor Yusuf Nardakani has been released and been able to return to his work in ministry and his family. He's not an American citizen. And the State Department spoke out. Saeed Abedini is a United States citizen. He's us. And our government's not here for him, or our State Department's not here for him. Mr. Chairman, a U.S. citizen being beaten and tortured in Iran today because of his faith deserves more from his government. We have an ambassador at large for religious freedoms whose office was actually quite helpful with regard to the Yusuf Nardakani matter. Her office should be engaged as we move forward. We need someone at the State Department that we can actually have dialogue with to get this moving. We had an unbelievable opportunity at the United Nations just 10 days ago, and that opportunity is gone for now. The fact is, and this is echoing what's already been said in one sense, that the situation in Iran is one of the deteriorating. It is one of the world's worst offenders of religious freedom and human rights. The problem is systemic and it's systematic. The human rights situation for Christians and other religious minorities in Iran has regressed to the lowest levels we've seen since the early days of the Islamic Revolution. Killing, arrests, death threats, attempted forced conversions to Islam, various intimidation tactics, physical abuse during interrogation and detention has significantly increased in just the last few years. There are two categories of Christians that exist in Iran for the government's purposes. Ethnic Christians, made up primarily of Armenians and Assyrians, and non-ethnics, referred to as those that convert to Christianity that leave Islam. Historically, the Iranian government had granted the ethnic Christians some form of religious autonomy. Unfortunately, that is no longer the case. Christians, whether ethnic or whether they are converts, are facing this, as I said, systematic and systemic persecution and discrimination. In fact, as was mentioned, our contacts in Iran have confirmed that 5 Christians who were arrested last October during a prayer meeting were actually tried this past Sunday for having threatened national security interests of Iran by having Christian gatherings. The same could be said of the Baha'is, a peace-loving religion that are being systematically persecuted, and again, it's deemed a national security threat. Iran increasingly attacks not only those exercising their faith, but the human rights attorneys and defenders in Iran who are trying to protect them. This week, the UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in Iran said, and I quote, "Unfortunately, a preponderance of reports communicated to him this past year indicate that the situation for individuals in Iran who advocate for the advancement of human rights is grave and continues to deteriorate. A majority of human rights defenders continue to be subjected to harassment, arrest, interrogation, and torture, and are frequently charged with vaguely defined national security crimes, which is seemingly meant to erode the front line of human rights defense in the country, which are their lawyers." Mr. Chairman, I work with their lawyers. I will tell you that the situation they're under is grave. The lawyers are being threatened almost to the same level as their clients. Iran is a repeat offender. They repeatedly violate their own laws and, as Congressman Smith pointed out, international law. Despite Iran's constitutional and treaty obligations, which require the Iranian government to provide a fair and public trial as well as various human rights protection, including the freedom not only of religion but to change one religion, and protections against torture, Iran consistently violates both its own constitution and its numerous international treaty obligations. In fact, they view these treaty obligations as nothing but not worth the paper they're written on. They sign them, they don't enforce them, I dare say they don't read them. The Iranian government touts that its law recognizes and guarantees rights to Christians, yet judges can issue fatwas to converts, and that penalty for that can be death. The death situation is serious. Outside the Evin prison, where Pastor Saeed Abedini is right now, they have constantly hangings going on in public for the entire community to see. Pastor Youssef Nardakani, as I mentioned, was actually sentenced to death. He was released with the help of this commission and many others working around the world. Our staff has communicated with one very prominent human rights attorney in Iran who defended 19 Christians who were formally charged with apostasy in the beginning of 2012. And he said the situation now is worse than it's ever been. Let me say this also with Saeed Abedini's case, and I'm sure you're going to hear more about this later, Mr. Chairman. They've actually charged him with being a Christian. The same thing was true with Youssef Nardakani. They will say it's crimes against the state, but we've actually translated the documents because we've obtained court documents in cases involving these Christians, and they're charged with being Christians or operating house churches. Iran's legal system is an absolute sham. Its persecution of Christians and other religious minorities, including some Muslim groups, as you mentioned, including the Baha'is, is entirely skewed, making the government the judge, jury, and unfortunately, in many cases, the actual executioner. They don't deal with fact. They don't deal with truth. There is no rule of evidence. Defendants have no real opportunity to present the case. In fact, in Pastor Saeed Abedini's case, there was one day notice of the trial. The second day of the trial, his lawyer was not allowed to attend. There is no chance for a reversal. The only time, and this happened in Youssef Nardakani's case, is that you can obtain freedom is when the Ayatollahs issue a decree, and then they'll say there was a procedural error, time served. That's for the people that get out. For the hundreds that do not, they end up on scaffolding, hung. A judge can order a death penalty under charges such as attempts against the security of the state, crimes against God, including insulting the Prophet Muhammad, and outrage against high-ranking officials. Since the international uproar of Pastor Nardakhani's case for apostasy, the Iranian government has increasingly charged Christian converts with attempts against the security of the state. In Nardakhani's case, they actually said it was apostasy. As you will hear on the next panel, the charge against Pastor Saeed Abedini facing in Iran is against a crime against the state, but they acknowledge it's because of his Christian activities. The Iranian government essentially creates a so-called national security threat by forcing Christians to meet in private homes due to the systematic measures it has taken to restrict church attendance, and then they say those gatherings are violations of national security interests. So they set up the crime, so to speak, and I use the word crime in quotes. These measures have included forbidding the formation of new churches, closing existing government-approved churches, restricting the distribution of Bible and Christian materials, requiring educational institutions like the Baha'is to operate underground and out of sight. The number of Christians who continue to be detained is climbing daily. It is climbing as we sit here today. Although Iran's international obligations prohibit arbitrary arrests and detentions, according to the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in Iran, over 300 Christians were arbitrarily arrested and detained between June of 2010 and September of 2012. And that's just the ones he could find out about. I dare say there are many hundreds more. In reality, this number is likely significantly underreported, as many Christians are threatened with retribution if they simply speak out. The judge that handles these cases is listed by the European Union as a serial human rights abuser. His assets have been frozen. Yet this is the judge they tout in Saeed Abedini's case. And our State Department, few statements that they've made, which have only been in response to questions, they express concern about the Iranian court system's proceeding. I want to say concern about a court proceeding in Iran, as if those are really proceedings. They're sham trials. They're not even show trials. They're sham trials. Many Christians have also reported that their interrogators applied various measures of coercion to force them to convert to Islam or to deny their Christian faith. In Yusuf Nardakhani's case, they gave him 3 opportunities to recant. He did not. He said, I cannot, I will not, and did not. And eventually, because of Mr. Chairman, this commission and a lot of other people working around the globe, including our State Department in that case, he was released. In September of 2012, the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in Iran reported that of the 221 individuals he interviewed for his report, 62% reported intimidation of family members when being asked questions. 78% stated they were beaten during interrogation. 8% reported being hung from ceilings for the purposes of soliciting confessions, including recanting of their faith. 64% of those interviews alleged that they were denied adequate access to a lawyer after the investigative phase of the case. And let me say that when they do get access to a lawyer, these lawyers are so intimidated. They're operating under very, very difficult circumstances. Frankly, the State Department, and I say this with due respect, Mr. Chairman, I'm the grandson of an immigrant. I love this country. But what our State Department's doing is abysmal. And I got a letter yesterday. It sent to one of my staff lawyers at the ACLJ. And I read that letter and I was stunned. That the State Department of the United States actually told Mrs. Abedini that you've not requested that we help your husband. Now, I could give you the numerous emails, her numerous conversations. I know that they'll get into it in that panel. But this is the systematic problem, and then they will rely on a lawyer statement in Iran. These lawyers representing, whether it's the Baha'is, whether it's the Christians, whether these other religious minorities, are barely surviving themselves. Their families are threatened regularly. And the fact of the matter is, when you've got the council being implemented this way and being interfered with this way in Iran, a Christian school has to be led by a Muslim principal. Christian students are denied entrance or expelled from secondary schools and have very little access to any type of higher education. The fact is that millions of people around the world understand that religious freedom and human rights are central to those fundamental issues that make human decency. That's being denied systematically in Iran. There's been global outcries before, and that spared Yusuf Nardakhani a death penalty. A death penalty because he was a pastor of a church. We cannot sit, and I know this commission is not going to, we cannot sit idly by. Ahmed Shahid, the UN Special Rapporteur, has said this: at least a dozen cases, lives were saved because of intervention and international opinion. A dozen cases where lives were actually saved. Part of that international opinion has to be the White House and the State Department not simply responding to questions, but proactively intervening. Saeed Abedini is an American citizen. And whether it is an American citizen, Saeed Abedini, or Iranian nationals being denied fundamental human rights, it's now time for the United States to lead by example, show the world that religious liberty and human rights are the very foundation for peaceful and secure societies. And, Mr. Chairman, I want to again thank this commission for taking the lead on so many of these issues and your steadfast leadership in support of human dignity and religious freedom, and the members of your commission around the world. And we appreciate that very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you very much. I want to thank both of you for your testimony. I would also ask that the letters you referenced, that we'd be able to see them, but we want to put them in the record at this time. I'm not going to have a lot of questions, and we just got word that there's going to be a vote about 11:15, and maybe I missed the first vote or something. So in order to give the next panel, we're going to do that. I would just ask you, I'm going to reference just for a second, though I feel an obligation to let Congressman Franks say something, because he brought this to all of our attention and did the leadership. And then secondly, I would suggest the commission, and I appreciate all the great work you've done, and the commission. I would respectfully ask the commission to ask for an opportunity to visit Iran and go. Secondly, there is a delegation going to Iran. It's a former member who I know is going. I'd like to put both of you in touch with that former member so you can speak to him personally. And I think you probably know him, and maybe some of the others that you know that are going to delegation, that to ask them as they go to Iran if they would raise this case. But we can
Absolutely.
talk off record.
That would be wonderful.
Congressman Franks.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to thank you for taking the time to draw attention to this critical issue. And let me also thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your wise choice of panelists. I had the privilege of listening to Dr. Lantos Sweat this morning on Fox, and she articulated the American love for freedom of religion and just for freedom in general in such a compelling, gracious way that it would have brought respect in the eyes of all Americans who heard it, and I was especially touched by that. And of course, Dr. Sekulow has been a hero of mine forever, and we've both had too many birthdays to discuss how long. But
you both look good.
Thank you.
Now, as one, Mr. Chairman, who has been outspoken on Iran's nuclear weapons pursuit, I recognize that the human rights violations in Iran can sometimes be overshadowed in the media by those kinds of issues. And those outside the bubble of human rights work hear far too little about those who are most drastically affected by every decision of Iran's oppressive, unstable regime, and that being the peace-loving people of Iran themselves. But Iran's tyrannical attempts to, in the words of Ronald Reagan, stifle the freedom and muzzle the self-expression of the people have now again been exposed to the world after the imprisonment of American pastor Saeed Abedini, who was sentenced, as so many have said, to 8 years in a harsh Iranian prison while working to build an orphanage in Iran. Martin Luther King once said, "Injustice everywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." And Pastor Abedini's case has starkly shown the far-reaching implications of even a single human rights abuse. And I think we're all so honored to have Pastor Abedini's wife with us here today, and I just want to let her know that she and her family are in the hearts and prayers of so very many of us. And while it's manifestly impossible for me to put myself in the shoes of the Abedini family, I can say, as a father, that there is nothing in this life that gives me more delight than my babies. And there's nothing in this world that gives me more joy than telling them stories and tucking them into bed. And so when I learned that Pastor Abedini, as with so many fathers I was especially moved when I read that he liked to do those same things. And I was, of course, reminded that there's a difference. His children in recent nights have constantly expressed to their mother how they miss their daddy. And because he's in an Iranian prison, notorious for torture, and all because of his Christian faith. And I also understand that Saeed's son, Jacob, recently turned 5 years old, and Saeed had promised Jacob that they would go to Disneyland together on Jacob's 5th birthday, and I'm told that little Jacob has had a kind of a hard time understanding why his daddy can't be there to take him to Disney World on his birthday like they planned. So I must tell you, when I think of Jacob and his 6-year-old sister, Rebecca, it occurs to me, as has been more eloquently stated already, that the U.S. State Department under John Kerry should be utterly ashamed of their failure to speak out on behalf of Saeed Abedini's precious family and of this tragic situation in general. The American people would be outraged, in my mind, to truly know how our State Department has responded with such a deafening and almost cowardly silence when an American father, husband, and pastor has been thrown into a harsh prison under an oppressive regime for having the nerve to practice his Christian faith. No wonder this oppressive Iranian government holds the Obama administration in such total derision as it proceeds to build nuclear weapons with which to threaten the peace and security of the entire human family. Now, I join over 80 of my colleagues from both parties, from both the House and the Senate, on a letter to the State Department asking them to exhaust every option in ensuring Pastor Abedini is released. And the State Department did not even see fit, Mr. Chairman, to respond to that letter. The letter was sent on February 12th, more than a month ago. The State Department's website lists 155 press releases that have been sent by the State Department just since our letter was sent. Releases on everything from the 100th anniversary celebration of Canberra, Australia, or to congratulating the Republic of Mauritius on its National Day, to the release entitled Spring Break for Smart Travelers. That's just a few examples, but not a single proactive statement or response has been provided about an American citizen sentenced to 8 years in an Iranian prison. Furthermore, the State Department declined to even send a witness, as has been said so many times. What a disgrace. The Obama administration is fully aware that Pastor Abedini's case is a manifest microcosm of what scores of Iranians experience on a regular basis. Religious minorities in Iran, especially Christians, Baha'is, and Sufi Muslims, must live in a constant state of fear over potential retaliation by a government that has been designated a, quote, country of particular concern for 14 years running. Now, I believe and I know that there are some media outlets here in this room this morning, and I would just pray that those journalists who have gathered here and are covering this issue will hold this State Department accountable for its absolutely criminal silence in the face of such a heartless injustice forced upon this beloved American pastor, his innocent family, and so many others. And I thank the chairman again for recognizing the desperate state of human rights and religious freedom in Iran. And I pray this hearing will help bring back Pastor Abedini safely to his family. And ultimately, I hope, Mr. Chairman, that this hearing will lead to the important strides toward a day when the march of freedom and democracy will leave this present Iranian regime on the ash heap of history, and the noble people of Iran will at long last walk in the sunlight of freedom. And I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Franks. Mr. Adler, do you have any comments? Because we are going to have votes 11:15.
Considering we have votes, let me go ahead and pass it.
Okay. Mr. Smith?
I won't ask any questions either though I have many, but let me just say, Dr. Sekulow, thank you for reminding us that the State Department is AWOL. This isn't the first time, God forbid. Hopefully it won't be the last time, but if past this prologue, it will be. Frank Wolf and I, all of us, have been so disgusted over the years by this inadequate response to human rights abuses in general and religious freedom in particular. I would note that when the International Religious Freedom Act was being considered, it went through my committee. It was Mr. Wolf's primary sponsorship of that legislation. Right in front of our committee, John Shattuck, speaking on behalf of the Clinton administration, testified against it.
Right.
And said that it would set up a hierarchy of human rights so that bias against religious freedom is so endemic, it's so embedded in so many people who operate within the U.S. Department of State. And when Nagmi, I should say, in her brilliant testimony and courageous testimony says and quotes Dietrich Bonhoeffer, "Silence in the face of evil is evil itself." The president should be naming names. Ronald Reagan did that. He talked about specific names. He risked superpower confrontation when he spoke about Sharansky. I was at the White House when he had a special gathering with regards to Iran on the Baha'i. First time it was done, strongly articulating our solidarity with the suffering people of the Baha'i faith in Iran. So again, when you look at the vote that took place in the UN, how hard did we work it? 89 to 30 with 64 abstentions. China, Cuba, Burma, Vietnam, Venezuela, the usual Belarus, the usual rogue nations were out there supporting Iran. But Afghanistan, where we have spent blood, lost so many of our men and women, they voted with Iran. So there's very deep concerns there. And again, thank you for being so strong, because AWOL means that people suffer, they die, they get hung, they get executed. And this administration, to quote your words, has been AWOL on a whole lot of human rights issues, but in particular, this tremendous pastor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I think what Mr. Smith was advocating for was the Ronald Reagan Scoop Jackson approach to human rights. With regard to that, thank you. And then if we can be in touch, because I want to, we'll get a conference call with the person and the two of you with it. Thank you
so
very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The next witness, and I just want to, unfortunately, we're going to quickly, Kenneth Bowers, Secretary of National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States. And you can begin as we sit down in that order. Mrs. Abedini, wife of the imprisoned Iranian-American pastor Saeed Abedini, and Jordan Sekulow, Executive Director and Attorney of the Abedini family, American Center for Law and Justice. Why don't you proceed? Sir, why don't you begin? Because, and keep in mind, they are saying about 11:15. It's
yes, sir.
I'll come back after that, but I didn't want to, so.
Okay,
yeah.
no problem.
I want everyone to hear the three of you is what I'm trying to say.
All right. Chairman Wolf and other distinguished members of the Commission, thank you so much for holding this hearing on a pressing human rights issue of significant global concern, religious freedom in Iran, and thank you very much for the opportunity of testifying today. I'd like to ask also, Mr. Chairman, that my full testimony be entered into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. I am the Secretary of the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States, the elected governing body of the Baha'i faith of this country. I'm here today to speak about the Baha'i community of Iran, a group that Dr. Ahmed Shahid, the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Iran, recently labeled the most persecuted religious minority in that country. The Baha'i faith is a world religion with some 5 million followers in over 200 countries and territories, representing virtually every racial, ethnic, and national group on the planet. Some 300,000 Baha'is live throughout Iran, making them the country's largest non-Muslim religious minority. The persecution of Baha'is has been particularly severe since the Islamic Revolution of 1979. Between 1978 and 1998, the government killed over 200 Baha'is. Thousands more were imprisoned, many of them brutally tortured. A 1991 confidential government memorandum signed by the Supreme Leader, which describes itself as addressing the Baha'i question, calls for the government to treat the Baha'is in such a way that, quote, their progress and development are blocked, end quote, and generally outlines a strategy for the economic and cultural strangulation of the Baha'i community. Economic and social pressure on Iran's Baha'i community is acute. Baha'is are barred from public employment. The government pressures Muslim employers to refuse employment to Baha'is and to dismiss Baha'is from their employment in the private sector. Baha'is are also often denied business licenses as a way of destroying their means of livelihood. Baha'is are excluded from public universities. At times, the government permits the enrollment of a few students known to be Baha'is so that it may publicly state that Baha'is are enrolled in university, only to expel them later. Baha'i school children are frequently harassed by teachers and administrators. Baha'i homes are routinely raided by government agents, and Baha'i homes and shops are often the target of vandalism and arson attacks. The property of Baha'is is often confiscated without compensation, and Baha'i holy places have been destroyed. Baha'i marriages are not recognized, and Baha'i children are considered illegitimate. Baha'is are not permitted to bury their dead according to Baha'i law, and Baha'i cemeteries have been desecrated. Iran's state-sponsored news media systematically disseminates virulent propaganda intended to incite hatred against the Baha'i community. Baha'is also cannot often obtain redress for the acts of aggression and abuse that they suffer. Since 2005, the government has been steadily increasing the pressure on the Baha'i community. Over 600 Baha'is have been arrested since then. In the spring of 2008, the government of Iran arrested the 7 members of the ad hoc leadership group of the Baha'is, detained them, and falsely charged them with, among other things, espionage, propaganda against the Islamic order, and corruption on earth. In 2010, these 7 individuals, and you've heard their names, but I think they bear repetition, Mrs. Fariba Kamalabadi, Mr. Jamaluddin Khanjani, Mr. Afif Naimi, Mr. Saeed Rezai, Mrs. Mahvash Sabet, Mr. Behruz Tawakkoli, and Mr. Vahid Tizfam were sentenced to 20-year prison terms. They are now nearing the 5th anniversary of their imprisonment. Beginning in May of 2011, the government conducted sweeping raids on the Baha'i Institute for Higher Education, the Iranian Baha'i community's informal system of higher education. Agents searched dozens of homes, seizing educational materials and arresting 17 individuals. In October 2011, 7 faculty and staff were convicted of, quote, membership in the deviant sect of Baha'ism, with the goal of taking action against the security of the country in order to further the aims of the deviant sect and those of organizations outside the country, end quote. And they were given 4 or 5-year sentences. 6 of these individuals are currently in prison: Mr. Kamran Mortazai, Mr. Mahmoud Badavam, Ms. Nushin Khadem, Mr. Farhad Sedqi, Mr. Riaz Subhani, and Mr. Ramin Zibai. Since then, 4 more educators have been imprisoned: Ms. Farhan Hassami, Mr. Kamran Rahimian, Mr. Kevan Rahimian, and Mr. Shaheen Negari. The situation has worsened considerably in the last 2 years. And to illustrate this, on January 1st, 2011, there were 56 Baha'is in prison. The number now is 110. On January 1st, 2011, there were 230 Baha'is who, although not then in prison, were awaiting trial, appeal, sentencing, or commencement of their sentences. This number is now 436. The Baha'is in the small town of Semnan have been particularly hard hit. Several Baha'is have been imprisoned, several homes have been attacked, and numerous businesses have been closed. Recently, 3 young mothers in Semnan were imprisoned along with their nursing infants. Of course, Dr. Lanto Sweat mentioned this, and you asked about the ages, Mr. Chairman, of these infants. And I happen to have 2 photographs, two of the women with their infants, and you can see how absurd and how inhumane this treatment is. This is one of the ladies, Zohre Nikayin, with her son, Rassam, and the other, Taraneh Torabi Ehsani, with her son, Barman. This is the one who's now suffering the lung infection. And you can see how absurd and ridiculous this whole situation is from these photos. On March 12, 2013, Senator Mark Kirk and Senator Richard Durbin introduced Senate Resolution 75, and Congressman Michael Grimm and Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky introduced House Resolution 109, which condemned the persecution of the Baha'is in Iran. It is our hope that these resolutions, hearings like this one, and actions taken by nations around the world will shine a bright light on the dire religious freedom situation in Iran and help to hasten the day when the Baha'is and all citizens of Iran are accorded their full human rights. I thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the Lantos Commission.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Bowers. I appreciate it. Ms. Abedini, you may proceed as you think appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to share my testimony, and Congressman and Congresswoman for allowing me to share our family story. My name is Nagme Abedini. My husband is Saeed Abedini, who has been sentenced to 8 years in prison because of his Christian faith. We have 2 children because he converted from Islam to Christianity. We have 2 children, Rebecca and Jacob. This picture was taken and the request of Saeed recently. He wanted to see the recent picture of our kids. Yellow is his favorite color, so my daughter wore that yellow dress. And every time his parents see him in prison, they put this against the glass window. And for the whole 20 minutes, he just looks at his children's picture. And as mentioned, Jacob is turning 5, and Saeed had promised him Disneyland, that he won't be able to do that. It is unfortunate that a day does not go by that the kids do not miss their daddy, especially at nights when he would tuck them into bed. Our family is definitely suffering during this time. I'm hoping the kids don't know about the 8-year sentence that Saeed has received and what that means. I'm hoping I won't have to ever tell them, and that we can work together and bring Saeed home to our family. I came to the U.S. in 1986 and also converted from Islam to Christianity in 1987. And I'm proud to be an American, and I'm forever grateful for America for allowing me the freedom to choose my religion and to accept Christ. I'm hoping that we will, as a country that was founded on religious freedom and fighting for freedom, that we will continue to stand up for what is right, and we can fight for religious liberty and be a leading leader in the world and a leading voice in the world for that religious liberty. It is unfortunate that Christians are the #1 persecuted people in the world, but not much attention or action is being taken for their protecting the religious freedom. I was first faced with this persecution when I went to Iran in the year 2001, shortly after the horrific event of September 11. And I was soon after arrested and threatened to be tortured, raped, and possibly killed if I did not deny my faith. And I did not, and was more amazed of how real Jesus Christ is in my life, and he protected me through that. But I was faced with the harsh reality that many, many Christians face around the world, that you're simply attacked and raped and tortured because of what you believe, nothing else. I met Saeed in 2002. We were married in 2004. He was also a Muslim convert. Within a few years, within a year after our marriage and a few years of ministry, we saw, as you know, the people of Iran, we saw thousands of people accept Christ in Iran, and a house church movement growing. Unfortunately, after President Ahmadinejad became president in 2005, we saw an increased persecution of Christians, and we left Iran in 2005. Came to the US, and Saeed became a citizen. I was remembering when he did become a citizen and how excited he was, and he would jump up and down, he was crying, and he received a letter from our government saying the flag of the United States of America, this is to certify that the accompanying flag was flown over the United States Capitol. At the request of the Honorable Carl Levin, United States Senator, this flag was flown for Saeed Abedini on the occasion of receiving his U.S. citizenship March 11, 2010. So I had to dig through and find this, and he received this flag, and he was holding it and waving it, and he was proud to be an American. So I wanted to bring this because it was a very special time in his life. Even though Saeed enjoyed being in the U.S. very much, he still had a very strong desire to go back and help the people of Iran and those he left behind, including his family, his parents and siblings. In 2009, we decided to go back to Iran and visit family, and unfortunately, at that time, he was arrested, as mentioned by the intelligence police, but he was allowed to come back to the U.S. And the promise that he would discontinue any house church movement activity, which Saeed has complied to this day. But they did, but Saeed did tell them that he is a Christian and he does want to serve the people of Iran, and they did allow him to start a humanitarian effort with starting an orphanage, which that was since 2009 and 2012. is what he's been working on, and traveled more than 10 times on the efforts of opening that orphanage and helping orphan kids, the least of these, the orphans and the widows. Although Saeed fulfilled his promise, the Iranian government did not. Saeed visited Iran in July of 2012, hoping to finish completing orphanage. And on July 28th, he was taken off a bus by the Revolutionary Guard. He was put under house arrest for 2 months. I remember our kids would continually be able to hear his voice and see him on the computer on Skype. And the day he was taken, and we didn't know where he was for a week, they kept coming to the computer and saying, "Mommy, can we see Daddy? Can we hear his voice?" And I kept saying, "No, we can't." You know, I couldn't explain to them why, that he was physically taken to prison. And finally, they kept saying, "Does Daddy not love us anymore? Does Daddy not want to hear our voice anymore?" And I had to tell them that he was in prison because he loved Jesus, and that he loved them very much, and he was looking for the day to come back and tuck him into bed. Our family nightmare began in September of 2012, and we've been fighting for his freedom since. As mentioned earlier, Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, "Silence in the face of evil in itself is evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak, not to act is to act." I must say I'm disappointed with our government. I'm disappointed that our president and our State Department has not fully engaged in this case. Disappointed that this great country is not doing more to free my husband, a U.S. citizen. I expect more from our government. In the Evin prison, Saeed's dealing with beatings, tortures, and he's continually told to deny his Christian faith, which he will not. He will not back down on what he believes. He has internal bleedings, he's suffering, and every day in that prison is a death sentence for him. He was, as everyone knows, he was sentenced to 8 years in prison on January 27. I realized that Americans are not all Christians, but every American, regardless of their beliefs, wants to be reassured and know that our government will take decisive action to protect us if someone uses force to try to make us abandon or change our belief. That we should know as American citizens that our government will stand up to protect our beliefs, our fundamental human right. Saeed is an amazing husband, an amazing father. The kids and I miss him terribly. Some mornings the kids run around the house and go outside and search in the yard. And I ask them, "What are you doing?" And they say, Mommy, Daddy was home. He was twirling. We saw him. And we had it. And I look at him and they say, "Mommy, was that real? Or was it just a dream?" And I have to hold myself together to look at them and say, it was just a dream. But I'm hoping and I'm asking for help. It was told that I have not asked directly for help, but I've pleaded many times, at least in the media, and many times I've asked the U.S. government to do whatever it can to free my husband from that prison, simply because he converted from Islam to Christianity and he's a Christian. And his human right is being broken and is being violated. And our family needs your help. Our family needs your support to bring my husband and their father back home. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your testimony. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I can speak, I think, for all the members here. We'll do everything we can. Mr. Jordan Sekelo.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman. I ask again, in the interest of time, because of the upcoming vote, that my full statement be made part of the record.
Sure, without objection.
Chairman Wolf, yesterday morning as Naghmeh Abedini was boarding a flight to Washington, D.C., she received a call from the desk officer at Near Eastern Affairs. This is at the U.S. State Department. The desk officer that on the first day she called within 24 hours of her husband being arrested by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, told her on the phone, "There is nothing the United States government can do for you." When that desk officer made the comment, someone from the Department of International Religious Affairs, who works for Ambassador Susan Johnson Cook, tried to break in. This desk officer cut them off, said, "I have authority. There's nothing we can do to help. You can keep us updated with the facts if you like." She received the same phone call from that desk officer moments before boarding a plane, after we have informed the U.S. State Department and this officer specifically to stop contacting the client we represent as her attorneys, as the family's attorneys, without us on the phone. Did it moments before her flight and said, "You've never asked us for help. You've never asked us for help. Your attorneys may have communicated. You may have been on those phone calls even. But you've never asked us for help." As you can see now, they knew this hearing was about to happen and are trying to cover their tracks. Someone at the U.S. State Department is taking out references to Saeed Abedini. It is not the Department of Religious Freedom. It is not the ambassador at large, whose office has not yet been fully empowered to engage this situation. And like they did for Pastor Youssef Nader Khani, who they have done more for than they have an American citizen. But I do want to tell you some of Pastor Saeed's story so that the facts are clear and that we have made those remarks. And it would be remiss for me to not acknowledge, again, the strong congressional bipartisan support. This is not a U.S. government problem. It has been an administration problem, an executive branch issue, specifically at the U.S. State Department. But we've had, again, including more than 20 members of this commission, Republicans and Democrats, have publicly condemned Iran, specifically for Pastor Saeed, and called for his release. That includes the co-chairs of this commission and all of the members of Congress here today. Thank you. It's one of just involving fundamental human rights. We talk a lot about the Christian angle of this, but this is also a U.S. citizen facing 8 years in a place where he is being beaten and tortured every day because he is a Christian. Now, the U.S. State Department did find time to mention an Iranian who was killed in Evin prison in their remarks to the Human Rights Council last week. They did not reference an American citizen alive in that same prison being beaten the same way. The European Union did. Australia did. America, silent. You have the world speaking out for Pastor Saeed Abedini, but not his own government. He was convicted by the Islamic Republic of Iran for his religious beliefs. And again, we've called this a sham trial. Of course, he's suffering innumerable human rights abuses, a violation of Iran's own constitution, their own treaties, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, their constitutional rights for religious freedom. In fact, Saeed Abedini and Naghmeh were married in a Christian marriage in Iran, recognized by the Iranian government. And this was, of course, all before the Ahmadinejad government and the more recent repression against those who have converted, who are now considered apostates by their governments and enemies of the state. On July 28, 2012, members of Iran's Revolutionary Guard took Saeed off a bus, took his passport, put him under house arrest. On September 26, 2012, the day of Pastor Saeed's scheduled court hearing, 5 members of Iran's Revolutionary Guard raided Pastor Saeed's house and placed him in solitary confinement for a month in Evin prison. His Iranian attorney in Iran was not even allowed to speak with him until less than 24 hours before the trial, which that attorney did not find out about until a week before the trial, what the charges would even be. The trial began on January 21st. The judge is known as a hanging judge. He was called that by the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. Youssef has defined him as one of Iran's 3 hanging judges. He is sanctioned by the European Union. Youssef has recommended his sanction, both his travel and, of course, economic sanctions against the judge, specifically and his family. To this date, the State Department has not accepted those recommendations and has taken no action against this judge. The European Union, of course, has. On January 27th, after the day of trial that Pastor Saeed's attorney was not able to attend, nor was Saeed Abedini, where people were forced to testify about their conversions and about his involvement in them. On January 27th, just a few days later, he was convicted and sentenced to 8 years in prison. His charge, he was a national security threat to Iran. But what was the act? The act was because of his work with the Christian church from 2000 to 2005. So we're talking about not even a a court trying to make up new charges, saying that he did something wrong in the last 2 years, or even on this current visit, but going back to 2000, 2005, which predates an agreement he made with the Iranian government so that he could continue to go home to visit his family. In 2009, with the intelligence police, so that he could work on this orphanage, where he was getting government approval. The Islamic Republic of Iran, working through the bureaucratic process, he was there getting final approval on his board. This is not someone who is trying to become a political opposition leader or flout the authority of the Iranian government, nor did he go into the country without the proper approval. The exact opposite. We first became involved, the American Center for Law and Justice, in Pastor Saeed's case and began representing the Abedini family on July 30th, 2012. That's less than 48 hours from when Pastor Saeed was first detained, July 28th. Our first conversation with the State Department was the following day, July 31st. We remain in contact with the State Department on a regular basis since that day. We are grateful for some of the statements that have come from the spokesperson and that have come from the White House press secretary. The first such call occurring on January 25th, 2013. Months it took to get those statements, however. We remain deeply concerned that this case does not appear to have received the prioritization of similar. We think about the hikers. Statements all the way from the President of the United States, working with sultans in Oman to get the money to the situation, very different. Think about what we have right now, the missing FBI agent. His family has met with our secretaries of state. Our family has met with our president. I think that is great. We think that is great. We just would expect the same kind of treatment, not phone calls 24 hours before your desk officer at Near Eastern Affairs knows that you're going to be testifying before Congress to your client without including us, saying that she hasn't asked for help. Now, she's been on Fox News every week, at least once a week. She's been on any broadcast that she can to tell her husband's story and ask for the president's support and ask for your support, which you have done, and ask for the Secretary of State's support. And that wasn't just Secretary Kerry. It goes back to Secretary Clinton, who did discuss Youssef Nadarkhani and call for his release in her official remarks on one of the human rights days focusing on Iran. So rightfully so, it is discouraging that Pastor Saeed's case is just not being addressed at that level, even with the public outcry. Again, over 500,000 Americans, the media coverage, as you can see today in this hearing, the interest that the public has about a Christian pastor who is an American citizen who is not getting the same kind of support as others. You wonder, is it his skin tone? Is it his name? Probably not. Maybe it's because he is a convert from Islam. It's a little bit more controversial than the political opponents our administration has had no problem getting behind and, of course, mentioning directly at the UN Human Rights Council. So let me just say in our closing, we want to identify, so we have identified the proper individuals to begin working with at the U.S. State Department. We need the State Department, Mr. Chairman. Ambassador Johnson Cook should be empowered there to work directly with us to be able to have the freedom to do that. She is not at this point. She's been very effective, and we view today's hearing as the Commission's commitment to this cause of freedom and human rights. And I ask all members of the Commission to encourage our President and Secretary of State to lend their voices as well. Let's make it clear that Naghmeh Abedini and her attorneys have asked directly for their involvement, and we're waiting for it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you very much. Just for the members to know, there will be a vote at 11:20 on the tyranny substitute, and then there's motion to recommit. So I'm going to stay through that, and since I'm going to stay, I'll go to Mr. Adderholt, Ms. Smith, Ms. Baracci. But we will make a request on behalf of the Commission for the Secretary to meet with Ms. Abedini, and so we'll do that. We'll circulate the letters to everybody here, and then in the conversation that we have with the Commission, I think maybe Ms. Abedini might want to be on the telephone call with the people that are supposedly going to go, so you can make it. And we will also, with regard to Mr. Bowers, has the department been in touch with you? Have you had direct involvement of the?
We have, yes, sir. Yes.
They have been responsive. Okay, with that, I'll go to Mr. Adderholt.
Thank you. Again, thanks for the testimony from all of you this morning, and I think drawing attention to this is...
Excuse me, I just want, Mr. Labrador, I didn't see you there. I thought you went out. Could you, you want to say something? I apologize. I saw you and please excuse me. Go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Abedini and Mr. Seculo for the work that you have done. I'm going to be very brief. I want to hear from you more than I think you want to hear from me. I just want to thank you for your courage and for I have a lot of friends in Idaho who talk about you constantly, just what a wonderful person you are and how strong you have been. And truly what an inspiration you have been to them. So I just want to thank you for what you have done. And Mr. Seculo, thank you for the work that you have done on behalf of this family. And I just want to hear thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you, Mr. Again, I apologize. I didn't see you slip in there, and I saw you come over, and then I didn't miss Mr. Adderholt.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, again, this is certainly something that I really appreciate the chairman and the commission setting up today, because as I mentioned, this is an issue that what has been going on in Iran has been on the hearts and minds of Americans, from not only the Christian perspective, but from all faiths. And when any faith is put into jeopardy, it puts all faiths in jeopardy. And but certainly the situation recently with your husband, Saeed, has been, I think, gotten a lot of attention, and it's shocking that the State Department has had that reaction. And so hopefully there'll be no doubt about their knowledge after today of your desire to have their help. And so it'll be very clear for the record. I do want to, and I'm going to be brief in just a couple of questions. I do want to ask Mr. Bowers, I did want to ask you, you had talked about the persecution that has gone on the Baha'i faith, and it seems like there has been a more intensification of persecution over the last couple of years. Considering that the Baha'i faith is, I think it has its roots in Persia.
It does.
What seems to be what is going on of why the intensity of the persecution over the last couple of years more than any time else in history?
Well, I don't know that we can say it's more than any other time in history, because during the early 80s, during the beginning years of the revolution, It was far more intense than it is now. Although you're right, in recent years it has become, again, more intense than before. We don't know what the precise reason may be. It may have to do with the current administration, presidential administration there. We just don't know the reason for it. But we can say that to the extent that the governments of the world and in international forums such as the United Nations and in the media, voices are expressed in support of the religious freedoms of the people in Iran, that this does tend to mitigate the severity of the persecutions that people suffer. So if a period of intensity comes, if governments of the world, like our government particularly, as well as others, speak out, then what we've often seen is for it to cycle back down to a certain extent, because as much as they may pretend to the contrary, the fact is that the Iranian regime is quite sensitive to world opinion and does not want to be called to account in the World Forum for its actions. And so commissions like this and the actions of our government are extremely important.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think that's well said. And like I said, I'm going to keep my comments to a minimum. My questions, I got one more I want to ask before I turn it on over, before we have to go for the vote. Mrs. Abedini, I wanted to ask about the orphanages. You were mentioning that your husband had ceased to do the work with the house churches, as he had agreed to, but he still wanted to, he had a very love for his country, where he was born. He had a love for the people there and wanted to do something. Of course, building the orphanages was a way that he could reach out to the Iranian people. Had these orphanages, had he been in contact with the government about working with them to set up? So were they aware that these orphanages were taking place?
They have to be approved by the government. The whole process, it was he was working with the intelligence police, he was working with government officials for the approvals for the building. they were aware of it every step of the way.
So this was nothing that he was trying to hide and
No.
whatsoever. This is something
It was a
openly.
government-approved orphanage.
Yeah. Well, I think that's important to know for the record that this is something that he was, regardless whether he was doing it behind closed doors or not. I mean, I can't think of a reason that you wouldn't want to build an orphanage, but all the more reason that they were aware of this was going on. It just shows the
Yes.
tragedy of it. And again, it's just really so disconcerting about what is going on with the State Department and their lack of response to this. And it's just shocking. I think most members of Congress don't realize what the lack of response from the State Department. So I'm hoping that this commission today and this hearing will resonate throughout Congress and hopefully will resonate through the State Department. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Adult. Ms. Bonamici?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for calling this hearing, and thank you to all the witnesses for your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Bowers, for highlighting the importance of the persecution of the Baha'i and how we need to get involved in that. Mrs. Abedini, I want to thank you, especially as a wife and a mother, for having the courage to come and tell your story publicly, for being out there and highlighting what's happening with your husband. I can't imagine what you're going through. Must be incredibly difficult. So I want to say thank you for being here and highlighting that. And I wanted to ask you, how are you able to keep in touch with your husband? You said his parents visit, but are you having trouble finding out his conditions and what's happening to him? Do you feel like you're getting enough information about how he's doing?
My only point of contact with him is through visitations that his family has with him in Iran. I used to have a few phone calls that he was able to make phone to phone, but that was cut off since the government cut that off January 9.
So you can't even speak with him on the phone?
I'm not allowed to speak with him. My only follow-up of how he's doing is through the visitations that is made by his family, by his parents in Iran.
Well, thank you for calling attention to this issue. I want to ask Mr. Is it Sekulow? Did I say your name properly? Thank you. Could you talk a little bit about, and I'm sorry, I don't know this, what the explanation is from the State Department? I know you suggested that perhaps there was an issue because the pastor converted from Islam, but what is the State Department's stated reason for not being more involved?
There have been a number of different reasons, actually, along the process, until our government spoke out when the State Department spokesperson, Victoria Nuland, was asked by a reporter, as well as Jay Carney was asked by a reporter. So he took the question and said, we will come back with a response. Until then, we were told that they could say nothing because of the Privacy Act. Now, there's an exception, of course, to the Privacy Act when someone's life is in danger. And, of course, your wife is on television talking about your case, and you're not able to get to an embassy to sign a document because you're imprisoned by the Revolutionary Guard. So that was clear. We also have a power of attorney signed by Saeed Abedini, so we represent the entire family. But, of course, they stopped using the idea that this would somehow violate the Privacy Act when their spokespeople, for, I think, political reasons, and also because it's an honest question, and I think they were trying to do the right thing by responding. And I think there's been a severe difference between, and it should be given them time now, the statements don't correspond to the action. So we know that when the U.S. government had an opportunity to speak out for Saeed at the Human Rights Council, it was the EU and not our government that did. They did reference someone in the same prison, but he's Iranian and dead. He's already been killed. Here they have an American sitting there they know about, we've been on the phone with, we've been working, asked them to make the comment there, and it was the EU who did instead. So there have been a number of different reasons. The Department of Human Rights and Labor and the Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom has not been allowed to fully engage because of the Near Eastern affairs. So there's been a number of we see ways to solve this, to move forward, to have a working relationship, and we hope that the Commission's actions will enable that, because there are people there who want to help, who are not being allowed to help.
Well, and I hope, and I'm probably out of time and need to vote, but I hope that you say you see ways forward. I hope
Absolutely.
you will let this commission know specific ways, and I hope, I don't know, but I hope that there are efforts being taken that maybe you don't know about. I think you should know about, but maybe for security reasons you don't know about. So I hope that there's actions that are being taken to make sure that we have his safe return. And just one more comment I want to make, Mr. Chairman and Commission and witnesses, that this hearing is just a reminder of how important religious freedom is, and I appreciate your bringing this to our attention. Thank you.
I would add quickly his physical health. He is now suffering internal bleeding. This is not a situation that can go on for months and months. And if there are secret activities going on, we actually met with every member of the Human Rights Council that could possibly speak out and help Saeed. There was no indication in those meetings just a week before that the U.S. government had given those governments the green light to speak out. And all of them had said to us, we need to hear from America first, even if they do believe it's better for us to take the lead. We know that Brazil and others have they've just communicated. We're waiting to see what your government does or does not do. So for that extent, we know there's been some inaction. Thank you.
Thank you, and I hope you don't have to wait much longer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Smith.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Let me just say to Mr. Sekulow and to Dr. Sekulow as well, you really give fresh meaning to the idea of competent counsel, but you go beyond it. You go the extra mile, and I've watched you in action for years. And Nagme, I don't think you could have people more committed and more competent at your back, getting what has to be done on a daily basis. So congratulations for that, because thank you for your leadership on this. This does represent, in my opinion, a colossal failure on the part of leadership by the Obama administration. That's not a partisan dig. I have been in this Congress, like Chairman Wolf, for 33 years. We work on human rights every day. I chair the Human Rights Committee, the China Commission, and the Helsinki Commission. There has been an indifference, especially to Christians who are being persecuted all over the world by this administration, that I find detestable. And it's got to change. You know, the fact that you were told nothing the U.S. government can do for you is outrageous. And the Religious Freedom Office, which has been downgraded, if you will. We just saw the Trafficking Office downgraded by the Leahy Amendment that just passed a couple of weeks ago, because the regional bureaus and the desk officers feel that human rights complicate statecraft. It's somewhere way in the back. I introduced a bill called the Jacobs Law because there's an American citizen, a New Yorker, a Jewish man in a Bolivian prison and charged with nothing. And now he's out of prison, but he's under house arrest, 18 months in the Palomacera prison. And our embassy for months would not lift a finger. So I would just say to Nagme that the indifference that you have encountered is endemic with State Department response because, again, human rights get in the way. Let me just ask one very brief question. The President will have an opportunity with NORAS to make a statement. Would it be helpful, maybe Jordan, you want to speak to this as well, to specifically mention the pastor's case by name, the way Ronald Reagan did so famously over and over again? Dr. Sweat mentioned Sharansky. You always build your human rights cases or your cause, the push, against about individuals who are suffering so terribly, and especially with the bleeding. I mean, this could be catastrophic any day now.
We absolutely believe, and thank you, Congressman Smith, a statement from the President of the United States will let the Iranian government know clearly and succinctly that this is important to the United States of America, the most powerful government in the world, the leader of the free world, that he knows that his citizen is there, and that his citizen must be released. And echoing every statement that we know, whether it's Yusuf, the Baha'i community, we know that more than anything else, because it's not legal process, we know that won't happen. Statements, outcries, petitions, and the higher up those statements go, the better Saeed's been treated already. The more press Nagme has done, the better Saeed is treated. But to get that next hurdle, to get to his release, we absolutely believe in Nagme. We've discussed it. We've gone through that process. A statement from the President of the United States as well as the Secretary of State would be extremely influential in securing his release.
Thank you.
Mr. Labrador.
Thank you, Chairman Wolf. I just have a simple question. This has been a difficult case for our office to deal with because our concern has always been that if we say more, we're actually hurting your chances and not. And it's been indication from some people that we needed to be careful. So what can you tell us that Congress can do? I want to hear from both Nagme and Mr. Sekulow. What do you think what more could Congress do to help you in your case?
Sure. I think first, having the commission today is very key. The statements, this speaking out, which I know you've done, Congressman, and also the letters. It's made a very clear case for us. I mean, we talk in the legal terms, that when this administration has been asked, by us, they were silent. Then it was members of Congress, and they were silent. Then they were asked to come today by the commission, and they didn't show up. Nagme flew from Idaho to be here with you today. They didn't come from down the street. They couldn't send a person. And they told her it's her fault that they're not doing anything. That was yesterday. This is after months. We're talking since July 30th. So we believe that the congressional action pressure on the U.S. State Department directly and the administration, the White House, for more than just statements. They have not made a proactive statement, not a single proactive statement about Saeed Abedini. The only time you'll see his name used is when they're asked a question and put on the report.
I have to add that, and nothing you can say could hurt his case. It will actually help. I've already shared so much on the media. So if there's any thing that you think is hindering you from saying and doing more that might hurt Saeed, I want to assure you that it won't. There's the more that's actions taken, the better for Saeed and his situation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Congressman.
Labrador's comments and being here too, and his help here. It always is good to speak out, always.
Yes.
I made the comment that what Mr. Smith was talking, it was the Reagan, Scoop Jackson, Henry Hyde, Tom Lantos approach. Always speak out, to stand with them, because it's important that the Iranian government, whatever government, knows that there may be something going on privately. We hope, we pray, but we also publicly to stand. It's like if we were in prison, would you want somebody to say, I'm really for you, Raul, but I just don't want to be with you. Oh, you want to be with them, stand with them. And so I think that's really important. But I appreciate what Congressman Labrador has done, and Mr. Franks and Mr. Adderholt and Mr. Smith and Ms. Bonavici. I want to make one last thing. We did call the Secretary's office while we were meeting, and the Secretary's office got back to us and said he will call me around noon. And we are going to ask that the Secretary or somebody representing him who really has the authority, but the Secretary, to meet with you. And hopefully that meeting will take place today.
Thank you.
Secondly, we want to get together. We want to get together. And Mr. Labrador is missing a vote. So if his opponent criticizes him for missing this vote, he is here. Just for the record to show. We would like to get together with the 3 or 4 on the phone with this person. We're not sure when the delegation leaves, but so you could speak to them and maybe to see where we go. And with regard to that, I think we can take more time, but I just want to thank all of the 5 witnesses. Particularly I appreciate But the commission will stay with this thing until the release takes place. And the commission will stay with the Baha'i issue. With that, unless you have anything to hear, is adjourned. Great.
Thank you.
What a wonderful result. I hope it works out for you today. And let us know if there's anything we can do. We signed the letter to Secretary Kerry as well. We did, and so we really wish you the best.